we go. So this is what it's about. This is obviously lifted off the internet. And on the face of it, you think, well, not a lot of it is that relevant to day nurseries. But there are some things that are valuable for us. And as it points out, it is for everyone. And it's certainly all of those do impact on us. It's whether we've got any influence to do anything about it or not that's the issue. And I quite like this one because it kind of illustrated that these people do have an influence. They're trying to do some gardening that's more high tech than perhaps the normal gardening is. And I think that's an important aspect of it. And bearing in mind that our children are going to have jobs that we probably haven't even heard of at this point. So what we can do with our children is to help give them the tools, the enthusiasm, the background knowledge to make an impact potentially in the future. And this is what the actual standards are about for SDG 9. And as I'm not going to read them all out. I'll just leave them for you to have a read of them. But some of them, as you can see, are more relevant than others. I mean, I quite like the promote inclusive and sustainable, but then it's industrialization, and we're not doing much about that, other than potentially providing children with the opportunity to engage in science. Financial services is probably more about our staff than about our children. And that is something that the people team have been working on with Andrew. What we're not allowed to do is provide advice, but we can improve access to that advice. Again, we can't do anything about upgrading industries or infrastructures, but we can ask for that. So that might be about advocating for children and advocating for ourselves on into the future. Similar with research, we can't do a lot of research in this area, but we can enable our children and potentially our staff to engage in research. 9A is about developing infrastructure in developing countries. Again, that's not something we can do anything with directly, but our partnerships with early years, educators, and services in other countries could form some of the groundwork for that. So it might be that we'll have a partner in Kenya that doesn't have access to any power or any water. And it might be something that we can do with them to enable them to get that access. And I picked Africa deliberately because Africa is where the majority of the world's increase in children is going to come from. In this country, our birth rates are dropping, and in most of Europe, just Sweden's increasing. But it's been identified that Africa is where children are being born in increasing numbers. So we should be looking for partnership with people in Africa, people in the global south. 9B, supporting domestic technology development. Well, the only thing we can really do there is some demand for domestic technology. So where we're demanding PIRs to turn our lights off, movement detectors, working with smart connections to energy, battery technology, solar technology, just by demanding that kind of thing, we are supporting their development. And then the last one's also interesting, access to ICT. So, for example, we've got apprentices that might not have access to ICT at home, but I know Aspire Training Team are working to do something to support apprentices to get access to technology. And I know the People Department have also recently put some information on access to technology for colleagues and partners so that they can access with in partnership with some suppliers. So, I mean, it might be that Zoe wants to say a little bit more about that later. So as you can see, there are, when you actually go into it, there are links that we can investigate. So how about how we can engage children? Well, I looked at various websites and support systems, such as Diane's list, and all these things can help us to engage our children. There's a couple of books there, Things That Go. So basically any activities relating to travel, whether it's trains, planes, buses, boats, cars, all those kinds of things, ambulances, trucks, tractors. So given that children have a wide range of schemes and schemas, as soon as we start talking about these things, we can investigate what could be good ideas for them. You know, how some might be more sustainable than others, what type of engines they might have. And on a child's level, it could just be around listening to those vehicles. You know, which are the noisy vehicles? So is it just noise pollution they're creating, or is it fumes as well? We could look at the local signposts and see how dirty they are. You know, by wiping down a sign and then seeing where the dirt could have come from to make that sign so dirty, we could then look at the local trucks and delivery services and things like that. Because we're looking at the seeds, you know, what's interesting, what's sparking their fascination, and then developing those. So I know it's indirect, but actually any of these activities do link to SDG 9. If we're role playing or using imaginative play in things like train rides and plane rides, then that's also very much linked. Sit and rides. We could also look at people that help us. You know, how are they helping us? And is that by using any of the technology that we've already talked about? One of the suggestions that we could do is a tally chart on how they got to nursery, and saying, you know, that children that are getting into nursery by walking are obviously not producing any nasty fumes. But people that are using EVs, that's potentially good practice. Just got to watch out that we don't make children that coming in diesel cars feel bad, because it's not their fault. But it's something that they could perhaps spark a conversation with them and their parents. We could also talk about sharing transport to reduce impact. And then we've got the design element of it. So we could talk about the design of things like making a bird table at the nursery, or the design of their homes. On a side point, really, I'm just looking at probably some of you know, my home was very badly fire damaged and water damaged. And we're hoping to replace it with 2 homes that are net zero, which is very exciting. And I mean, if the children have got any projects like that nearby, or any projects in the nursery, you know, say we're putting solar panels in, as we are at Tops Folkestone at the moment. They're having a new roof. That new roof is going to be very much more sustainable and insulated. And then watching the solar panels go on, you know, it's all very topical and relevant. And I think important that we engage our children and our staff with what's going on, and potentially making the link to SDG 9. There are some resources that are relevant to SDG 9. Now, I know we've been pulling away somewhat from using big computer tables and things like that in the nurseries, because they get so much screen time at home. But there are other things that they can do that are not screen time. And these are just some of the examples that I was able to find. Some of them we have in our nurseries, some of them we don't. Some of them we might have something similar. So that listen to me thing, you can record a message and then the children can play it back. It can be anything from sounds of trucks and sounds of EVs to sounds of chickens, you know, or just them telling a story to themselves. But they're a really useful ICT resource. And Ofsted are looking at whether nurseries have got ICT resources. So I think it's important that we have some of these. Just got to pick the ones that are relevant to the children's interests and the staff interests. There's a rack of torches, which are great. Children love having the lights out or going under the tables and using technology in that way. The more advanced children might be into doing electric circuits for kids. I know John Blatchford, Siraj Blatchford has written a lot on resources for this type of thing. It's also appropriate for the out of school club. And then there's a smart picture book down there where you've got sounds of various animals recorded to help children think about sounds relating to what they're looking at. And I would potentially look at recording trucks and cars and things like that and adding it to those books if you've got them. And then there's a bebop thing, which is a programmable little critter that you can program to move in different directions. I think it is appropriate for us to start engaging with technology with children. Shame, I don't think, yeah, I think we do have people from operations, and we've got Sam on board as well. But when we're reviewing our facilities for our children, these types of things are things that we should have when we've got children that are interested, which I'm sure they will be, as it's so relevant to the world that they're seeing around them, but without them being glued to flat screens. Lifted from the EYFS, children need to be enabled to create and think critically. They obviously already have their own ideas, and our role is to help them develop them, make links between those ideas, develop strategies for doing things. And here's some just very simple examples of children doing just that, using role play, engaging their brains, thinking creatively, and linking to technology. You know, if they're looking through pretend telescopes or binoculars, perhaps that's something that we can enable as well. And as we know, we're already following the schemes and schemas as in schema play. And the importance of creativity here, again, lifted to help explain why creative is so important. And creativity is something that's often not developed in international nurseries, for example, where they're learning very much more by rote, you know, sat rigidly at a table and learning their letters and learning their numbers. Whereas we know that it's so much more important, or certainly as important, to enable them to develop in other ways. So, for example, involving their spatial relationships. And incidentally, children with dyslexia are often better with spatial relationships. They've got a different sort of brain. And anything we can do to enable them to develop those that spatial facility is really helpful. And there's some other things that we can work, you know, what is the same weight, what is the same color, what's the same distance away, looking at how things balance, different shapes, how we measure things, whether we measure that with sticks or whether it's actual with tape measure, lots of problem solving and more. And these activities involve us as adults wandering aloud and developing the child's wonder. You know, oh, I wonder what that is. How does that work? Is that going to balance on that? Can we cover that with this? And just celebrating their curiosity and them inquiring about things, reflecting aloud. And if adults can't think of anything else to talk about, then use this as a cue to prompt them to wonder about what's around them. And it's okay not to have the answer, because it's all right for them to have ideas that are confusing. Oh, we don't have enough plates at the table for the children we've got. What are we going to do? Don't give the children the answers, enable them to talk about what the answers might be. Allow them the space and the time to think about how to address a problem. And I think I've seen these come up in some of the Ofsted responses. Is sometimes adults are too fast to come in with the answers. Allow children to be confused, encourage that, and encourage them to think their way through it. And obviously this links to SDG 9, because our children are the creative technologists of the future. So if we can give them some of the groundwork, then we're doing everybody a favor. Actually, I think before we go on to that, I'd just like to offer that out for discussion. Does anybody think of anything else that we could do to develop children's creativity and their problem solving? I don't think we've got many from operations on the call, but now's an opportunity, I think, before we go on to what we can do as a company. Kelly, have you seen your colleagues come up with anything else on this?
Yeah, we've already got a whole list of activities that they can use in the nursery. So it's things like using safe recyclable materials, cardboard boxes, to encourage them to build structures, bridges, how things work. things like pulleys, wheels, ramps, and levers, so children then can work out how these things work and move things from one end to the nursery to the other.
So would you say those should be on some kind of an audit to make sure that we are providing those things in our nurseries, pulleys, levers, and wheels, and scales, and or are they
Yeah,
already?
if it's to support sustainability, I suppose that's an operational question rather than a training question. We would encourage it as part of our curriculum design when we're supporting our learners. So giving them the ideas and then they take that into the nursery. But whether it's an audit or a requirement, that's not really for me to
No,
answer. But
the learners can't actually do that with the children if they don't have those resources, do they?
it'll be down to them to go to the nursery manager and request any additional resources. A lot of it they can find like free stuff. You won't need to purchase additional stuff. It'll just be
Yeah,
like the recyclable materials boxes and tubes and those sorts of things that they can.
absolutely. So it's loose parts play, junk modeling resources, those kinds of things. We would expect those to be in every nursery. But the step further into the kind of pulleys would potentially be kind of the more outstanding nurseries. You'd expect to have those kinds of things that children could explore with, pulleys and scales and things.
Yeah, and there was another on our list was about using like old gadgets and taking them apart to see how they fit together and then trying to create something else by using those parts. Again, we probably don't have those types of resources in the nurseries, so that will
Yeah,
have to be like a request.
yeah, indeed. And it could be combined by using Lego and Duplo and those kinds of resources that we have. I know they're plastic, but they last forever, and there's no reason
Yeah,
to use that with the children, because that's what they're going to potentially be working with in the future. How people make that plastic or that material, it will be something for the future. But I know even Lego are trying to make their blocks and bricks out of stuff that is more sustainable. And we've obviously got people like Community Playthings that are making their blocks and bricks out of sustainable materials. But yeah, we absolutely need all those building materials, whether they're ones that last for 500 years or the ones that will go in the, be recycled in the cardboard bin once our children have done what they're going to do with them.
yeah. But there's things like trips out on different types of transport as well.
Yeah,
Not necessarily in the nursery, or going on walks around the community and looking at different resources and things they can bring back to the nursery, like sticks and leaves and things, and they can build something from that.
indeed. Whether it's something really big like a teepee or whether it's, I remember Wareham doing a little farm setup, and they kind of made a 3D model of a little farm, and then they put their little small play cows and things like that into the scene that they'd set up. They call it a diorama, and that was absolutely lovely. So yeah, again, following the child's interest in what they would like in their little buildings and structures, and you could introduce some teepees and things like that, and point out that it's not just for Red Indians. That's kind of a bit of a fallacy that Red Indians, don't exist as that and don't live in teepees, but like the cowboy films, but that we do use teepees. In fact, my daughter's got a teepee that she uses for her festivals and camping and things like that. And they're quite fun structures to build, and can provide shelter. And there's no reason why they couldn't build a teepee in their garden. They may even have one. It's quite interesting because of the kind of almost triangular structure or conical structure that they create. So yes, absolutely. The list is almost limitless. Visits to the scrap store to see what people are producing, taking them back, creating their own things with them. Christmas, great time of year to be using recycled, upcycled materials to make new things as presents for others. So it can tie in with seasons and festivals as well. So actually, a fabulous subject. Anyone else got anything that they'd like to add for working with children to and knowledge of SDG 9? No. Okay, so I started looking at it myself for SDG 9 for the company, and I'm hoping again that people will be able to contribute extensively to this one. The ones that we've obviously been engaged with already, adopting sustainable infrastructure practices. So we know we've got solar panels on a number of our nurseries, and we're planning to put more in, and also batteries, which I haven't mentioned there. All of our nursery settings have water butts, I believe. Hopefully a lot of them have got the things to measure what's going on in the water butts as well. I had an interesting idea the other day. Somebody was saying that they put tablets into their water butts to ensure that they weren't carrying bacteria and nasties. We don't normally play with water out of the water butts. I know it's normally used for watering plants. So I think we've got to be a little bit careful there as to which water butts are used for watering plants, in which case we don't really want to be putting bacteria killers in them, and which ones are potentially used for water play. But certainly to my knowledge, the water butts are only used for watering plants, not for putting it into the water play trays and things like that. But it's something to reflect on when we're using water storage in the gardens to then play with it. Are we treating it in any way? Because there's good bugs and bad bugs, aren't there? The good bugs are really great for the children, and they should be coming into contact with those. The bad bugs could give them a stomach upset, and we don't particularly want those. So it's something to consider, health and safety wise. We do have some water storage, for example, the huge tanks in under the Bearwood Garden that we use for laundry. And we've got lots of saving energy things in place, like the PIR and energy saving light bulbs. What do you think? Are we actually fostering innovation, research and development activities? I mean, it did occur to me, are we supporting people doing dissertations, sharing research? Anyone got any thoughts about that, or either of those two things, really?
I suppose the only time we'll be doing that is in our delivery for apprenticeships, because we cover sustainability as part of that, and they would be doing some research and development.
Yeah.
But that's more, I suppose that's more about working with the children rather than for a company.
Yeah. I think we do work with our software developers, for example. At one point, we were even employing software developers to work with us. So I think that's an important thing. And I know that's tax deductible, which is quite good as well. Sam, any thoughts on that as to how, maybe this is an area for looking at? Sam's on the call and has a PhD. Or maybe she was on the call. Okay. And then we've got working with suppliers to adopt sustainable practices. Now that is something that we're required to do for B Corp, to evidence that we're working with suppliers. It's something I do on a regular basis whenever I go to the supplier meetings and they're telling us about their new products. I always ask, well, how sustainable is that? What evidence do you have that it's sustainable? Because I know that suppliers are prone to giving out greenwash and sometimes accepting greenwash from others. So they'll say, oh, yeah, this product that we are supplying you has been made by X and they say it's sustainable. And then when we say, well, what evidence have you got? And they say, oh, well, it's bioplastic. That's obviously very sustainable. And we're saying, well, how sustainable is bioplastic? It is actually making plastic. It is going to last for 400 or 500 years plus. Is it any more sustainable than something made directly from oil? And the short answer is yes, it is a bit more sustainable because it's made from something that's renewable. But it's not completely sustainable because it's making plastic that's going to last for hundreds of years. So it's, we know it's a journey, like buying toilet paper. Well, some toilet papers are more sustainable than others. But sometimes the toilet paper made from bamboo clogs up our toilets. So the fact it's more sustainable is not terribly useful if it's going to then clog up the toilets and cause a lot of damage. So it's very much a journey where we work together to ask for more sustainability, but then give them time and then work with them to make solutions. Now that's something that we're doing as adults and is an ongoing thing, but we need to ensure that all our team are doing the same thing. You know, it's not just something that directors do or managers do. It's something that we encourage all our colleagues to say, well, is that sustainable? You know, what are the problems with that? Is this a problem? What can we do to improve it? Can we not use that? Can we use that less? Can we use that more? And just have those discussions, because I certainly don't have all the answers. You know, I've got some of the answers, but I absolutely don't have them all. And neither do our suppliers. It's very much something that we can try and make sense of, and by talking about it and challenging each other, and listening to our young staff, because sometimes they'll come up with a question or a problem that we need to take to suppliers and ask them about it. Are we enabling them to do that? And that's right down to our level 1 apprentices. You know, they might suddenly come up and say, oh, you know that football? And we've just bought another half a dozen footballs. How sustainable is that? I don't know. You know, we need to go back to the suppliers and say, well, you know, what's the provenance of footballs? Are they a good thing to use? Should we be using a different supplier's footballs, for example? You know, everything we use, we want to encourage that questioning, and then treat them with respect when they do question ourselves. And I think that will really encourage ownership from, you know, all our colleagues, that if we're transparent and we're also accountable in our efforts and our questioning, you know, it's all okay and it's all good. And it could certainly be a project for apprentices or at any level to do a bit of research on something that they're interested, something that they use or they like to use, and get people out to do the supplier festivals and fetes and education events, so that they can ask those questions firsthand, you know, not even going through us. Anyone else got anything that they'd like to? I mean, Sandy, you must come across this all the time when we're trying to be more sustainable.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously seeing it a lot, and looking at the evidence with the B Corp certification. I'm also looking at, it's not just about the product being sustainable, it's about the process of production is also sustainable. Not just how much stuff we're pushing out into the atmosphere, but how we're treating the people that, or how those people are being treated that are making that product. And is it equal? Is it, you know, is it fair? Is it right? And there's a lot in the B Corp about fairness of the workforce. So that is a big side of it as well. So you know, you sort of look at that and think, it does make you think, because you know, you think, how often do you look at a label in a clothing item you want and think, how has this got from onto the rack or whatever? You know, should I be buying this, or should I be perhaps looking into it? I know, you know, I don't do it all the time, but it does make you think a lot more when you're involved in this sort of stuff at work. So yeah, I think it's about looking after the environment, but it's also looking after the people that live in that environment as well.
Absolutely. And it needs to be a combined effort, because one person can't do it all, can we? It's just not, it's not possible. So and I'm, for example, I'm not involved at all in ordering uniform, for example. So those people that are involved in uniform, those would be the ones to investigate, well, what's going to be the best for the staff? How are those uniforms made? Do we really need uniform at all?
Yeah.
You know, there are many nurseries around these days that don't have uniform. Is that a good thing? Is it?
Yeah, and again, it's can our suppliers verify the process, the history of that product? Can it be verified? It's not always possible, and sometimes the process is so long and lengthy, it's near on impossible to verify it. But I think it is getting a lot better.
Yeah, and I think it's easier to verify supply if it's made locally.
Yeah,
because then you're more able to check on it firsthand. It's like buying eggs, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you buy eggs from a supermarket and it says barn eggs and this kind of thing, you know, what does a barn egg really mean? It means a whole load of chickens are kept in one barn. or several barns, and is that the way that we should be treating birds? Whereas our local farm, fluffette eggs come out of our local farm, and we know that those chickens are out in the field. So it's easier when you can go and see those. In fact, they have an open invitation. You can go along and see their chickens laying their eggs, and I think that's lovely. But yeah, it's a lot less easy to tell when you're buying biros and tablets and you know, those technological things. It's, well, how can we possibly know if it's made in China somewhere, how, you know, how people are being treated? Is it any of our business? You know, it's challenging, isn't it? I think it is our business, because we don't want to be supporting people working under slave conditions at all. I'd rather not buy those things. But it is a challenge. And I think it needs to be open to everybody to question. That does lead on to that. Supporting our local suppliers. And Zoe, you're on the call. I just wondered if you wanted to say something about facilitating access to financial advice.
Yeah, of course. Sorry, there might be a bit of background noise because Liz is also on the Teams Zoom call, so hopefully you can hear me okay. So there's quite a few bits that we do now to support colleagues in terms of financial support. So there's the trust for people in hardship, and the colleague loans, which are interest free, and whenever somebody applies for one of those, we do reply and refer them back to the Money Helper website, whether they're successful or unsuccessful in their application, just to redirect them to somewhere that's trusted for free financial advice if they need to take that further at all. Also the salary sacrifice schemes for each person for cycle to work, and the tech scheme more recently, where they can spread those costs over monthly out of their wages, and it's deducted before tax, so there's those additional savings there as well.
Excellent.
Yeah, and the payday subs as well, where when it's the 5-week months, to try and avoid people going to those payday loan companies.
Yeah, we don't want them going to loan sharks and being charged hundreds of percents for when they've already done the work. They just need paying a little bit earlier. So yeah, we'd obviously recommend that to all nurseries. What about our customers, you know, the parents and people using our services? I mean, we're seeing that there are more children in poverty than virtually ever before in the UK. And it won't be helped, I don't think, by clobbering employers, which is what's headed our way from next April. Do you think we have any responsibility to our children's parents?
We do the clothing libraries, and I think those it's a very minor thing, but if we can extend those kind of things for our parents, I think that could be really helpful. So, and you know, offering that coat exchange, you know, bring in a coat, take a new coat, those sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We already mentioned seeking out a partner. This is nurseries in the Global South, and collaborating with others to share what we're doing in terms of good practice, which is where Funky comes in with all the marketing team to share what we're doing. You know, we could, of course, take it as an original KPI, but we don't do that because we don't think it's right to keep actions to ourselves in terms of sustainability. But yeah, Funky, would you like to say about what we're doing sustainability wise to collaborate with others?
So sustainability wise for marketing, I know we try to post out as much as we can about sustainability. And in terms of collaborating with other nurseries, that's something we are currently looking at. But it is something that we're paying attention to. And also when we're just doing our competitor analysis, we also pay attention to how other nurseries are practicing their sustainability as well. And if there are things that we can start doing for tops. But yeah.
Absolutely. And we're working obviously with registered charities like Gecko.
Yeah.
I've also started attending some meetings myself with the NCB, which are the National Childhood Bureau, Childcare Bureau, no, Childhood Bureau, I think, who partnered with a whole load of other organisations working towards preventing or doing something about poverty for children, and learning from them and sharing with them. So there are many other NGOs working on the same subject. And there, at the moment, there's a questionnaire out from the government about what we can do to reduce poverty for children. So there's a you know, it's right now they're wanting responses in the next couple of months. So I will share that link with yourselves as well. But I don't know, I didn't think to have it ready for today, but I only just responded myself today. And it's things like, you know, what can we do to improve income? What can we do to reduce outgoings? And like Sam said, the coach sharing, book sharing, boot sharing, all that kind of stuff will help to reduce their outgoings. We can't really, I don't think, do much to improve families' incomes directly, but we can indirectly by providing childcare so that they can go out to work, and by advocating for parents to have more help with their childcare, but also with meals. You know, I don't know if I'm sure you're aware, but in schools they get school meals if they're suffering from poverty, if they're on certain benefits, and we don't get that for early years children. So we can get a 2-year-old child into nursery who's hungry, and obviously we need to feed them, otherwise they can't play, and then they can't learn. And then we can't educate and care for them properly if they're hungry, or if they're eating rubbish. You know, if they're eating chocolate and loads of carbs and loads of sugar and super ultra processed foods and things like that, makes it very difficult for them to learn. So part of our role as a company is to advocate for children to government, to try and get them to listen to what children need. And small children, yes, they need access to cogs and wheels and you know, things that balance and weighs and bricks and so on, but they also need food. You know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, food is one of the absolute essentials in order for children to feed their brains. So I see it as really important for us as a company to be advocating for children to government. And whereas I was hoping the Labour government would be really strong in this area, their latest budget is a real step backwards from next April. So we need to do this. I thought I'd do a little bit on action plans, because action plans are so fundamental to performing on the SDGs. It's full of what goals are you doing, how are you going to do it, and if you don't have an action plan, well, I quite like this expression. It's not mine, I've cribbed it. If you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. Because it's really true. You have to have those goals and those targets, which is what the SDGs are about. And I was quite keen to hear from you as to how that impacts on your work in your various capacities. Do we have a plan on what we're going to do for these SDGs? Are they smart? You know, do they have by when we're going to do it, and who we're going to get support from to do it, and all the, you know, what is it we're going to do? So anyone, any thoughts about action plans for their particular roles and how they include sustainable development goals?
I was actually talking to Diane about this yesterday. We're having a look at it, and it's a really interesting question, because it comes back to the old idea: should you have one action plan or one strategy for sustainability, or should it be embedded through all of your action plans and all of your strategies? So what we do have is sustainability in lots and lots, well, of all of our different audits and action plans, as at least one section, and throughout the maintenance budget and throughout Alto sites. So we're thinking about ways that we could potentially tag those actions, so that if someone wants to see them all together, we can kind of pull them together in the system. But certainly at the moment, they're spread throughout maintenance audit, health and safety audit, you know, all the way through everything we do. And it's an interesting question about whether to pull it out or not. So
yes, and who for? Do we need to pull it out for ourselves? And if we don't, then You know, do we have to do it for inspectors? I would say probably not for some inspectors. While they're not that focused on sustainability, they say they are, but in practice they're not. So it is interesting, isn't it?
Well, I would like it embedded in what everybody does, you
Absolutely.
know, in every single person's audits and actions. But I would also, if someone wants to see it, like to be able to pull it out. So I think that's the next stage of our development, is potentially to tag those actions and see if we can pull them together as one report.
Yeah,
Rather
that would be
than,
great.
one action plan. So yeah, it was interesting, but we had a good discussion about it yesterday about whether we should pull them out, or because they've been pulled out, put back, pulled out.
They have.
And it just doesn't quite seem to work for me when they're pulled into one plan, because the actions belong to so many different departments, as they should.
Absolutely. Every
So-
department has it somewhere.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
And we
So-
do have an action plan as a sustainability group, though, don't we? And that covers all different departments that we review at our sustainability meetings.
We have an action breakdown for the things that we do, but have we got a action plan? We've got an ESOS action plan. We'll have a B Corp action plan. We'll have loads, but and we do review them, but I don't know if we pull them into one central place, really.
Indeed. And you know, with a plan, you'd expect a plan to follow on from a strategy, or at least a risk assessment. And it doesn't even really tie in with that. Because we can't say, oh, well, at the moment we're planning to cut our carbon by, you know, 1 ton a month. We can't say that. We don't do that. But do we need to?
Well, no, because I mean, the plan is always to reduce it by as much as possible every day, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And we track that through our KPIs.
Yeah.
And of course, we are reducing in many ways, but then every time we take a new nursery on, we escalate it up again. So so it's not a straightforward, you know, it's 5 tons now, we want it to be 4 tons in a year. We can't say that, because we might be doing a number of extra children or extra buildings. So it needs to be per child or per member of staff or per building.
It's really difficult to do it per child, though, because each nursery is so different. Some of them we control the power, others are not. So per child the average is so blunt.
Yeah,
it's just almost not helpful, the average per child. So
yeah, I'm inclined to agree. And also there's, you know, some children are in full time, some children are in for 6 hours. So then you'd have to average again for full-time equivalent child, and they can do that in a school because all their children come in for the same time every day, but you can't do it in a day nursery.
I'm sure Andrew could do it with a clever formula.
He probably could.
I've got faith that Andrew could do it.
Yeah, you're probably right there. Okay, so so I just wanted to raise that, you know, action plans. Some people make it sound very straightforward. It's not. So just to summarize this relatively short presentation, because as I said, a lot of this cross-references with other areas. SDG 9, that's the title, Industry, Innovation and Infrastructure. So we had a look at what that meant, what it was broken down into. We looked at activities for children, and we looked a bit at the company's perspectives, and we briefly discussed action plans. And that's really, I think, all I can do on SDG 9. Has anyone got any questions at all, or any further suggestions that they'd like to make about SDG 9? No. Thank you, Doke. That's fantastic.